email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Joining me today on The Conversation is Juan Gutierrez. Juan is the CEO of Global Services at Siemens Gamesa, a renewable energy company focused on harnessing the power of the wind to provide clean energy, address the climate emergency, and build a better world for future generations. Juan has been with Siemens in some capacity for over 18 years, holding various leadership positions across the company, including Senior VP of Marketing and Sales and Senior VP of Latin America. Prior to that, Juan earned his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the Universidad de los Andes in Bogota, Colombia, a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Illinois, and an MBA from Rollins College. Juan, thanks so much for joining me on The Conversation today.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
So I don't know if you watch any of the Marvel movies or any of the, those Disney things, but I believe that everybody who comes on the podcast is kind of a superhero, and every superhero has their own backstory, right? Their origin story. So tell me a little about you and what got you from where you grew up to where you are today.
Thank you. Definitely, it's been a fantastic journey for me. I'm coming from Colombia. I basically was born and raised in Colombia. I did my bachelor's there. And I've been now 21 years in the U.S., and I've actually worked, I studied here, did my master's in Illinois, and then I've been 18 years in the company. So it's been a combination of positive events, good decisions that I've been able to make, and I think also good luck and timing. I think it's always a combination of that, right? However, I always say luck comes to those that are prepared. So, I've been studying very hard. I've been working very hard. And I've been fortunate to be in a company and to have a lot of people around me that has helped me in my career. I think now I always say I have my dream job. I work in the renewable business, which is growing. I work in the service side, which I really like also. And I have a global job. So I have the opportunity to meet different cultures, to work with peers around the globe, and be able to, experience how everybody does business in a different way. So it's a combination of many things.
That's awesome. I agree. I think that I find that people who work really hard tend to be luckier.
Yeah, that is true.
So tell us a little bit about your company and then where the group that you specifically lead.
So in Siemens Gamesa, we basically are a wind turbine manufacturer. So we design and build wind turbines for onshore and offshore. In the company, we have 3 business units. So one is producing the turbines for onshore, the other one producing the turbines for offshore, and then the third one is the service business unit, which I am responsible for. So in the service business unit, I am responsible for all the long-term programs, all the aftermarket activities, everything that is done after the turbine is installed. And this includes both onshore and offshore. So I get to see, the whole company, and I'm also looking at the long-term view of the business. So I'm sitting with the technology and our customers for 20, 25 years.
Wow. You better have good relationships, right?
Exactly. A good marriage.
A good marriage. So what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the renewable energy sector across your career? Because, almost 20 years, you must have seen quite a variation.
I think we are going through probably the biggest changes that I've seen in the career right now in the industry and the sector overall. Over many years, this industry has been very focused on reducing the cost of energy, expanding, the volume, doing very fast innovation, bringing very fast turbines to market. So it's been a lot about volume and speed and market share, right? I think that focus has led to many problems. As many know, we are having a lot of challenges now in the company, but it's across the industry. If you see, many of the OEMs in the wind industry have been loss-making, and it's not only this year, but also previous years. So I really see that now this is changing. We're all focusing on, coming up with a product that is basically that we can trust, that we can build many times the same product instead of customizing so much. We're also looking to value more what we do, right? At the end of the day, we are bringing technology that generates electricity with zero emissions. So the value that we bring to the market is pretty huge. So it's a big change to the market because we are changing terms and conditions. We are changing how we value our products, how we value our services. But it's important that the whole industry values that and that we all help each other, because at the end, everybody wants to have cleaner energy to help the world, right? So I think right now we're going through a difficult time as an industry across, but it's probably the biggest change that I've seen and the most important change to be able to have a sustainable industry in the future.
Okay. But you still see, obviously, it's one of the main ways we're going to be able to combat climate change still, right? Is the wind, solar,
absolutely,
renewables.
Absolutely. I think at the end, it's a proven technology, right? We've been implementing it. Right now, we have thousands of turbines under operation, also in the offshore side, which we are leaders there. So we maintain over 2,000 units. So we have, very high availability, and it's definitely a technology that will continue to evolve and that we need to be sure that we keep on the mix. I mean, there's enough wind out there and enough space still to build onshore and offshore turbines.
There's lots of wind for sure. What team projects are you most proud to have been a part of?
I think I've been very lucky in my career that I've been in very good teams and very exciting projects. Maybe two that I can think of is early in my career when I was starting in the onshore wind side in the Americas. We were having a hard time competing in the market, and we were working on a very large order, over a gigawatt, which at that time was one of the biggest orders. And we put together a very small team, cross-functionally with technology, with sales, with operations, and we came up with a new solution. It was a blade extension. So basically, we were reutilizing the same nacelle, the same molds, and then we were able to extend 7 more meters. And this was really helpful. It created a lot more energy, which at the end improved the competitiveness. And at the end, we ended up winning this order. So it was exciting. It was, it was very focused on the outcome, and the result was very positive. We were able to sign the order. We built the turbine, and now it's exciting for me in my role. I'm actually maintaining this fleet that we built and sold at that time. So that was a very interesting challenge that succeeded. And then another one, if I look at what we are currently facing in my current role, I've been 3 years in the role. We put a team together that I'm very close to. We really feel like we trust each other, and we've been facing a lot of challenges in the service business. And one of the things that we put ourselves target was to grow the aftermarket business. So we have the long-term programs, and then we have the aftermarket. And then we set up some strategies and execution plans. And then we've been able over the last 2 years to grow 60% this business. And then we still think that we can grow it more. So I think this was a very exciting project, let's say, that is really a strategy that now we have in the business and has helped us a lot to overcome the challenges of less new units coming from onshore.
That's 2 great examples. And either one of those, was there a huge obstacle that you had to overcome? Did you and the team were able to tackle?
Many obstacles.
Yeah.
I think all of these challenges are, of course, full of obstacles. I mean, there's always a lot of, processes that we need to overcome. There's also a lot of opinions and interest, internally and externally, that we have to overcome. So it's really an effort to be able to mobilize the team. And again, it's across many functions, not only internally the company, but also externally with our suppliers and our customers. So that's what makes it exciting, right? When it's difficult, and then you can see that you can achieve it.
I was going to ask this question a little bit later on, and I still may, but since you brought it up, you have a global footprint. And so you have kind of internal customers. And of course you have your external customer that you end up selling to. Are there tips and tricks about how you communicate well between the different groups and be able to get your message across in a consistent way?
I think the biggest challenge is communication, always, right? Because one thing is what you say, and the other thing is how people perceive it and how people translate that into what they want to know. So for me, being a global company, I'm dealing with many different cultures, right? I have 5 regions. We have projects in India, we have projects in Brazil, in the US, in Europe, in many different areas. And I think this is a challenge, but I think the most important thing is to understand the differences, to understand the different cultures. I feel privileged because being raised in Colombia, studied in the US, and work all my life with Germans, Danes, and Spanish, it gives me a good idea of, how different cultures behave, let's say. I think the key is that you don't change the message when you communicate, right? For me, the message should be the same because otherwise you're not, saying what you mean. The key for me is how you deliver the message. So it's how do you approach it, how you deliver. And I think that changes depending on the culture or even the function. So some people like to be more structured, more formal, more direct. And then some like to be very informal, more, face-to-face communication. Some people like to be told what to do. Some people like to be part of the conversation and be able to give an opinion and give the feedback. And at the end, for me, the key is that the message is clear and that you actually get buy-in from the people. Like otherwise, the communication is not effective at all.
We actually open the podcast every week with the quote from George Bernard Shaw that says the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I think you kind of hit it at the very end of your answer there, which is people need to be able to ask you questions back and get what I call clarification on which direction you want to go so that they're able to better understand the message and how you really intended it, as opposed to hearing it through my language barrier or my the way I define terms, or even having a bad day or not. I may receive the message in a different way. So I like the fact that, you pointed out that you have to deal with different people different ways. Some people like to be just told, hey, go do this. Other people like to be a part of the conversation. But in the end, you need to make sure the message gets across.
Exactly. I think there's a couple of key things that I always think about, the communication skills. First one, I think you have to be authentic and consistent. I think people would always feel that if you're just reading a document or just being told to say something versus do you really believe in it? So I think it's important that you believe in it, that you're authentic, and then you're consistent with your actions, right? That what you said in a town hall, then you actually do the same and act on it on the next meetings that are coming, right? If you don't believe in it, it doesn't matter how you say it, the message will not get through, right? And then the second part is to be able to have good communication, you need to be a good listener. So you also need to listen more, meaning if they're telling you, I'm not getting the message, or it doesn't work, or I don't believe in it, don't ignore it. Listen to them, spend the time, and always take feedback as a gift, right? So if I look at my role, I make a lot of questions. I had a colleague that told me, you manage by questions. And it's really because I like to listen what others are thinking and to understand if what I'm thinking and what I'm trying to communicate is getting through, right? So I think listening and asking questions is also a key part of communication.
I couldn't agree more. I think that we have a saying that I've always used, which is you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that ratio, meaning listen, more than you talk. And you don't learn when you talk, you learn when you listen.
Exactly.
So I'm a firm believer that a team's greatest asset is their people. And in a recent blog post on LinkedIn, you wrote, quote, people matter, and it is through people that we would deliver on net zero, end quote. So what techniques do you employ to keep the people on your team aligned, focused, and motivated towards that unified goal, such as net zero? And maybe start with a quick definition of what is net zero.
Yeah. So first of all, net zero is that we want to be sure that we don't add more emissions nor CO2 emissions to the world. I think that is the key. It's clear that in the current, industrialized world that we live, there will always be some emissions in some way, even with all the new technologies, all the high efficiency. But the key part is that we don't add more, right? So that is the key, that if we are adding, because there's some technologies that just need to be there, that we're also reducing in another side, that we're also consuming or capturing that in the other side. So at the end, there's a net zero. So that is the key. And then in terms of people, I am a really strong believer that a company is the people. That's it. It's really the success or the failure of a company. It's all around who is in the company. how loyal they are, how committed they are, and how talented they are. So success or failure are always with that. If I look at my team, I'm very focused on leading with trust. It's something that I always believe in. I try to get very close to my people, try to really understand what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how can I help them, and I try to foster a lot of collaboration. Right? And the best way to collaborate is always to have full transparency. I don't like to work on these teams where, the meeting ends up being on the side after the meeting or during dinner, right? So for me, it's always, let's bring the topics, let's address them now, let's put them on the table, and then let's help each other. Because I always trust that everybody comes with their best intent and everybody's trying to do their best. And if they cannot do it, there must be a reason. So if you understand that reason, then you can always help, right? So I do spend time with my team outside the business specific topics to build a strong team. So we've done management retreats where we focus a couple of days. How is the team performance going? How do we work better together? How do we collaborate better together? So it's very important that, to spend that time, and then they will also do the same with their teams, right? So it's really about, trust and also listening, like I said in my previous answer, not only with my direct staff, but also down to the lowest level in the organization. Of course, the higher you go, the more difficult it is. You start getting the blind sometimes, but I still try to do this through town hall meetings. I always leave open questions, open time for anyone to ask me whatever they want. And then we do roundtables. So we do random roundtables, just with no agenda, just open space, 1 hour, and then we talk whatever anybody wants to do. So I think these things are key. And of course, having a good strategy that everybody understands, and then taking that strategy down to an execution plan and down into the different functions and regions. Right? That is key, so that everybody is really, motivated and understands what we need to do and how is their role playing into the bigger picture of the company.
I think that's really important, as well as they understand the why, because if you just give me the what I need to do, I can go do it. But if I know why I'm doing it, I may figure out a better way or have a suggestion, or I just may be more motivated because I understand the value of what I'm doing, as opposed to just being given a task. And so it seems like you're trying to communicate to people how they fit in the overall execution and what their why is. Why are we doing this, and what is your part?
Exactly. I think the impact that people bring in the organization is huge. And if every employee understands the impact they have, they will be more motivated and engaged. So I always try to explain that, how everybody fits together.
And it's really important for team dynamics, because a company, or in my world on projects, for instance, a project, the team is temporary in nature, and they may have worked at the same company for a long time, but they may be geographically dispersed. So they're just email addresses. And part of the planning process would be to have them really feel like they're connected to the other individuals on the team, so that they are part of a team, and then you do see teamwork, as opposed to just, Clint at acmecorporation.com, where it's just an email address. And so it sounds like through your town halls and the things you're doing, you're trying to really establish that connection between the individuals, so they do feel like they're part of a greater whole.
Exactly. And also it helps me do my job better, because then people want to help. And they want to bring the topics, and they want to bring the problems, so that, you can address them. So I think that let's say, speak up culture is key, and, spending the time. Of course, it takes a lot of time, but I think it's very relevant.
Absolutely. As a leader in the renewable energy sector, you connect with people from a variety of different industries, governments, investors, board members, other energy companies, etc. What advice do you have for leaders that are trying to balance the needs of the people in the different constituency groups?
I think in every situation, you will have always different interests, right? Everybody has their own role, either governments or in the company, or even within the company. Each function has their own role. I always try to find a common denominator. So what is that we're all trying to achieve? Before you think about your group and your role, if you're in the government or you're in the customer or the supplier side, what is that overall you're trying to achieve? And then I think the interesting thing for our business is that at the end, we all want to have more clean energy. We all want to create a better world, right? So that is the common denominator. And then, of course, how we get there is with a combination of support from many different areas. So once you have that common denominator that everybody says, yes, this is what we want to do, and we want to work towards that, then the next step is understanding the needs of each part. What is the needs of each part? How does each part measure success on their role? Right? And I think each party would have that part, and then trying to find a fair balance. Right? For me, I always try to find value, grow the pie, let's say. I read a book on that to say, let's grow the pie. And then the pie is bigger, so then you can actually share. If you have one rope and everybody's pulling that same rope in the same direction, then somebody would lose. So it's always better if you are, again, understanding the common denominator, understanding what each part needs to do, or what are their targets and how they're measured, what is their success, then you can find a more better balanced approach.
Well, that concludes part one of my conversation with Juan Gutierrez, CEO of Global Services at Siemens Gamesa. Coming up in part two, Juan gives his advice for leading teams through periods of innovation.
I think you need to isolate them a little bit in terms of, not isolate them, but give them air cover, time, and budget to explore, right? Which, of course, is very difficult to do because, there's always the day-to-day. There's always the things you need to deliver next week, next quarter, and innovation takes time, right? So you need to give some time. You cannot overload the team with rules and guidelines, reports, business cases, because then things will not flourish, right? So it's that balance to say, how much budget can I put here? How much time can I wait? And then how do you judge at the end if there's something that you want to pursue or not, right? Because you can also not get obsessed with something and don't stop it, right? If you see that things are not working and there's no future, you need to move on fast and then explore something new.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.